If you became a millionaire tomorrow, would anyone actually be able to tell? Most people assume the answer is obvious. A new car in the driveway, a bigger house on a better street, a wardrobe full of designer labels. But the wealthiest people on the planet are almost never the ones flexing on social media. They are the ones you walk past every single day without noticing, because they have deliberately chosen not to be noticed. Today, we are breaking down the exact financial strategy the ultra-wealthy use to protect their money, their relationships, and their peace of mind. A strategy known as stealth wealth. We will cover why it works, the real financial and psychological cases behind it, a cautionary story of what happens when someone gets this wrong, and exactly what you should be spending money on instead once you have it. Before we get into it, if you want more breakdowns like this one, subscribe to the channel, tap the like button, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. Scroll through Reddit or TikTok for 5 minutes, and you will find hundreds of posts insisting that truly rich people never reveal their wealth in any way. That claim is only half true. Wealth does leave signs. A Lamborghini being towed by a beat-up pickup truck because it broke down again, a quiet payment made without a moment of hesitation at a restaurant, a decision made without ever glancing at a price tag first. And if you are watching a video like this one, it is safe to assume some part of you wants to be rich. So it is worth pausing and asking yourself, honestly, why? Maybe you want to leave a job that no longer fulfills you. Maybe you want to travel without calculating every expense in advance. Maybe you simply want to retire your parents and give them the kind of life they spent decades working to provide for you. And for a large number of people watching content like this, the honest answer is simpler and a little less comfortable than any of that. They want other people to see, clearly and unmistakably, what they have managed to build for themselves. That desire to be seen is completely human, and there is nothing wrong with feeling it. But there is another path, one used quietly by a large share of the wealthiest people alive, and that path is called stealth wealth. The principle itself is simple to state. Build enormous financial resources while keeping your lifestyle, your spending habits, and your net worth almost entirely invisible to the people around you. Some of the richest individuals on earth live in modest homes on ordinary streets, drive practical cars that need no explanation, and dress in plain, unremarkable clothing. You could stand next to one of them in a grocery store checkout line and never suspect that their bank balance carries 8 or 9 figures. The natural question is why anyone with essentially unlimited financial resources would deliberately choose to live this way when they could afford almost anything they wanted. As it turns out, there are several concrete, practical reasons behind this choice, and they matter far more than most people realize until they experience the alternative firsthand. The first and most practical reason is privacy and personal security. Once a certain amount of wealth becomes public knowledge, it quietly transforms from an asset into a liability. High-profile individuals become attractive targets for burglary, harassment, and in some cases even lawsuits, sometimes from complete strangers, and sometimes, uncomfortably, from their own extended family members. Consider the recent, well-documented wave of burglaries targeting professional athletes across the United States. The FBI issued direct, formal warnings to professional athletes about organized theft rings specifically targeting their homes. These were not random break-ins carried out by opportunistic criminals. They were timed with precision around away games, when a player's travel schedule, which is public information published on league websites and covered in local news, confirmed with certainty that the house would sit empty for days at a time. It takes very little research effort to look up exactly when a professional athlete will be out of town for a road game. And once that information is freely available, breaking into an empty, expensive home becomes dramatically easier for any organized group willing to plan a few weeks ahead. Security professionals who work directly with high-net-worth clients have been remarkably explicit about this pattern. Security professionals who work directly with high-net-worth clients have been remarkably explicit about this pattern in recent years. The head of one major protective security firm summarized it plainly. Organized criminal groups are not going after people with modest, unremarkable incomes. They are specifically going after recognizable, wealthy, high-profile individuals, because the potential payoff justifies the extra planning involved. In an era where home addresses, daily schedules, and even detailed floor plans can often be found online with only minimal effort, discretion has quietly become a genuine security tool rather than just a personal preference or a quirky lifestyle choice. The less visible your wealth is to the outside world, the smaller the target painted on your back becomes by default. For many high net worth individuals, this single factor alone is reason enough to avoid public displays of wealth entirely, regardless of how much they might otherwise enjoy showing off what they have earned. There is also a deeply human cost to visible wealth, and no story illustrates it more clearly than that of Billy Bob Harrell. In the mid-1990s, Harrell won a lottery jackpot worth $31 million. At the time, he was a working man in his late 40s, barely making ends meet, and the win seemed like the answer to every financial problem his family had ever faced. He was convinced, with good reason, that this sudden fortune would finally allow him to properly support his wife and children. But almost immediately, his life became entirely public. As a newly minted local celebrity, reporters wanted interviews, neighbors wanted stories, and it became nearly impossible for him to say no to the growing number of people around him asking for help. He gave money to friends, to distant relatives, to his church, and he spent heavily on new homes and cars for his family. That level of financial pressure created deep and lasting tension inside his marriage, since he and his wife disagreed sharply on how the money should be managed and distributed. Within just 8 months of winning that life-changing jackpot, the two of them were divorced. Even after the divorce, Harrell kept spending at the same breakneck pace he had grown accustomed to, and within just a few years he was completely broke and back in debt again, as if the $31 million had never existed at all. He later told his own financial advisor, in a quote that has been repeated many times since, that winning the lottery turned out to be the worst thing that had ever happened to him. In 1999, still overwhelmed by everything that had unfolded, he took his own life. His story is an extreme and tragic example, but it captures something that applies far more broadly than most people assume. Sudden, highly visible wealth, especially without any real privacy or personal boundaries, can attract more pressure, more conflict, and more pain than it ever manages to solve. Had Harrell been able to manage that windfall quietly, away from public attention and the constant stream of requests for help, there is a strong argument that his outcome, and the outcome for his family, would have looked meaningfully different. The real lesson here is not that winning a large sum of money is inherently dangerous. It is that visibility without any boundaries is what turns out to be dangerous. If your financial position becomes public knowledge, you effectively lose the ability to say no gracefully, because everyone around you already knows, with certainty, that you are capable of saying yes. There is no rule requiring you to broadcast your bank balance, your year-end bonus, or your latest successful investment. The specific people who genuinely need to know your financial position, a spouse, an accountant, an estate attorney, already have that information by necessity. Everyone else in your life does not need it. And in practice, handing it over to them rarely benefits you in any measurable or meaningful way. If anything, it tends to quietly cost you more than it ever gives back. There is a second major reason to keep wealth quiet, and this one has nothing to do with physical safety at all. It has everything to do with the quality of the relationships you build going forward. If your online presence and your day-to-day lifestyle openly broadcast wealth, you will inevitably start attracting people who are drawn to that wealth itself, rather than to you as a person. Some of them will be relatively harmless enthusiasts, genuinely interested in the cars or the lifestyle for its own sake. Others will be looking for an opportunity, whether or not they consciously realize it about themselves. A modest, understated lifestyle filters that entire dynamic out almost automatically, without any effort on your part. Drive an ordinary, practical car. Keep your social media presence unremarkable and low-key. Do these 2 simple things consistently, And the people who still choose to spend real time with you are doing so specifically because of who you actually are, not because of what you happen to own. There is also a purely financial argument for driving something ordinary rather than something flashy. European luxury and exotic vehicles come with maintenance costs that can run 5 times higher than a comparable standard vehicle. And repairs are frequently delayed for weeks at a time, while specialty parts are shipped internationally, since many of these cars are never mass-produced at scale. A Lamborghini or a Ferrari is also rarely practical as an everyday, daily driver vehicle. Realistically, you will likely need a second, far more comfortable car for ordinary weekly use anyway, which only adds to the total cost of ownership. This is precisely why a well-known study conducted by Experian Automotive found that a significant share of high-income earners actually drive mainstream brands like Toyota, Honda, and Ford rather than luxury marks most people would expect. The available data simply does not support the common assumption that wealthy people automatically default to flashy, expensive vehicles. Most of them, it turns out, have already done the math and decided it is not worth it. The third reason to practice stealth wealth is that it actively protects the relationships you already have in your life. This next point is uncomfortable, but it is worth stating directly and honestly. People are naturally, unavoidably affected by seeing what they themselves do not have. Even your closest friends, even people who are genuinely, sincerely happy for your success, will sometimes have a passing, unwelcome thought about what their own life might look like if things had gone differently for them instead. That reaction is not a character flaw on their part. It is simply an ordinary piece of human nature that shows up in almost everyone at some point. In professional environments specifically, appearing overly wealthy in front of coworkers can create quiet, unspoken resentment and make you seem noticeably disconnected from the people you work alongside every single day. Managing your outward image carefully is not about deception or dishonesty. It is fundamentally about protecting the relationships that actually matter to you over the long run. There is also a strategic, purely financial reason to stay quiet about specific dollar figures. When someone learns exactly how much you paid in taxes for a given year, they can very quickly reverse engineer a fairly accurate estimate of your total income, even if you never state the number directly. When you casually mention a large gain or a large loss in the stock market to a friend, you draw unwanted attention to your overall financial position in ways that rarely, if ever, benefit you. And there is a practical, real-world consequence to this that many people overlook entirely. Once someone knows you have significant money, certain service providers, contractors, repair companies, even some vendors, will quietly charge you more for the exact same work they would otherwise perform for someone with a visibly smaller budget. It is not an ethical business practice by any reasonable standard, but in practice, it happens far more consistently than most people assume, driven by the simple, unspoken assumption that a wealthier client can obviously afford to pay a little more. The fourth reason to embrace a quieter, more understated approach to wealth is that it genuinely keeps you grounded as a person. There is a real, measurable psychological cost to building your entire identity around visible possessions. Both research and lived experience consistently point toward the same underlying conclusion. Lasting fulfillment tends to come from meaningful experiences rather than from accumulated objects sitting in a garage or a closet. Travel to new places, learning genuinely new skills, spending real, undistracted time with the people you love, these are the things that actually shape a person over the full course of a lifetime. Possessions, by direct contrast, depreciate steadily over time. They go out of style. They eventually break down and need to be replaced. None of that applies to a memory built with people who truly matter to you, which tends to hold its value indefinitely rather than losing it. Choosing meaningful experiences over outward displays of wealth is not really a sacrifice at all. It is simply a better long-term investment in your own overall happiness and sense of identity. There is also a longer-term, slower-building pressure that comes with visible wealth, one that most people never fully consider until it has already become a real, recurring problem in their life. A larger, more impressive house means more square footage to furnish and decorate, more ongoing cleaning, more landscaping work, and very often a small dedicated team of people required just to keep the property properly maintained. Visible wealth also tends to create an unspoken, constant expectation to keep up appearances for neighbors, extended family, and your broader social circle. A religious or community organization you belong to may increasingly look to you specifically for larger, more generous donations than they would ask of anyone else. Even something as simple and routine as a wedding gift can start to carry a noticeably heavier expectation once people around you assume you have significantly more to give than the average guest. None of these gradual pressures actually move you closer to genuine financial freedom. In many real cases, they quietly move you further away from it, because the entire original point of building wealth in the first place was to reduce your obligations over time, not multiply them indefinitely. There is a short, widely shared observation that captures this entire idea remarkably well in just 3 simple stages. In the first stage of life, you cut your own grass, largely because you do not yet have the money available to pay someone else to do it for you. In the second stage, once you have built up more financial success, you start paying someone else to cut it, simply because you finally have enough money to comfortably outsource the task and reclaim the time. In the third and final stage, much later in life, you go back to cutting your own grass again yourself. Not because circumstances force you to, but because you have built enough genuine freedom and enough unstructured time that doing it yourself has quietly become a real pleasure rather than a chore to avoid. That third stage is the actual destination worth aiming for. It was never really about the size of the house or the badge on the front of the car. It has always been about having enough time, enough peace, and enough freedom to choose exactly how you want to spend your remaining days. So if the underlying goal is not to visibly display wealth, where exactly should that money actually go instead? The first and most consistently overlooked category is longevity, investing meaningfully in your health, regular medical checkups, quality nutrition, consistent physical activity, genuine preventative care rather than reactive treatment does not photograph well for social media, and no one watching from the outside can tell that you are spending money on it at all. But it is arguably the single highest return investment available to any person at any income level, because it directly extends the total number of years you get to actually enjoy everything else you have worked so hard to build. A longer, healthier life is fundamentally worth more than any physical object you could ever purchase with that same amount of money, no matter how impressive that object might initially seem. The second category, genuinely worth prioritizing, is comfort. This does not mean luxury purely for the sake of outward appearance. It specifically means practical, everyday improvements to your actual daily life. A significantly better mattress that measurably improves your sleep quality. A direct flight instead of a long, exhausting layover. A comfortable, well-located hotel room instead of automatically choosing the cheapest option available. These particular upgrades rarely impress anyone watching from the outside, and they were never designed to. But they meaningfully improve the quality of your day-to-day existence, which is ultimately the entire underlying point of building financial wealth in the first place. The third category worth serious consideration is other people in your life. If genuinely helping friends and family brings you real, lasting fulfillment, this is one of the most rewarding possible ways to use your financial resources, not as a public display for others to witness, but as a quiet, deeply personal choice made without any expectation of recognition. Supporting a parent's overdue retirement, helping a sibling get through a genuinely difficult financial stretch, or contributing meaningfully to a close friend's long-term goals tends to create far more lasting personal satisfaction than any single purchase ever could, especially compared to a purchase made primarily for the sake of being seen and admired by others. The fourth and final category worth spending on is hobbies and genuine personal passions. The specific pursuits that add real lasting meaning to your life, entirely separate from any outside social validation. Whether that means finally learning a musical instrument, picking up a completely new sport, or simply having the time and financial freedom to properly explore a long-standing personal interest, this particular kind of spending compounds over time in a way that physical possessions simply never manage to. It steadily builds real skill, genuine curiosity, and a strong sense of personal identity that has absolutely nothing to do with what anyone else around you happens to think of you. Stealth wealth, at its core, is not about hiding out of shame or embarrassment. It is fundamentally about protecting everything you have worked to build: your physical safety, your genuine relationships, your day-to-day peace of mind, and your long-term financial freedom. The people who understand this idea best are almost never the loudest people in any given room. They are the ones quietly living exactly the life they actually want, without ever needing anyone else around them to confirm it or validate it for them. If this breakdown gave you a genuinely new way to think about wealth and how to properly protect it going forward, subscribe to the channel for more breakdowns just like this one. Tap the like button and leave a comment below with the one specific financial habit you are personally committing to starting today. I will see you in the next one.